audience regardless of technology or ability. If accommodations are required, please call 360-279-4500 at least 2 business days prior to the meeting. At this time, we will go to public comment. During this time, citizens may comment on subjects of interest not on the agenda or agenda items. To ensure comments are recorded properly, state your name clearly. Individual comments will be limited to 3 minutes to ensure maximum participation during the 15-minute time frame allotted for this time. Public comment may also be submitted online at oakharbor.gov/public comment at least 2 business days in advance of an advisory board meeting. We do not have anybody in the audience this evening. Did we have any comments submitted electronically? No. Okay. So at this time, we will close the public comment. We will move on to our public hearings. No public comments were received prior to today's meeting. Because we do not have a quorum, we will open the hearing. We will continue it to our next meeting, which will be held on January 23rd. During this time, interested parties are given the opportunity to provide testimony or other comments as applicable. To ensure comments are recorded properly, state your name clearly. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. The first item up is item A, conditional use permit ownership code amendment, and that will be presented by our senior planner, Ray Lindenberg. At this time, we will open the public hearing, and we will continue it until next month. So since there are no comments and there's no actions we can take, we will close that public hearing, and we will open the public hearing. Oh, I apologize. So we are not closing it. We're just continuing it till next month. So with that one still continued, I can open the second one, correct? Okay, perfect. All right, so item B is our Oak Harbor Municipal Code subdivision requirements. That was to be presented by our director, David Kuhl. We will continue that to our next meeting on January 23rd, 2024. And that's it for our public hearing. So because those are both continued, nothing to close out there, we just move forward, correct? Okay. All right, so we will move on to our discussions, actions, presentations. There will be no actions taken today. Our first item is item A, is the selection of chair and vice chair. That was to be introduced by our director, David Kuhl. We will continue that over to our January 23rd, 2024 meeting. Item B is the 2023 Comprehensive Plan Amendment. That'll be presented by our principal planner, Kat Kamak. It'll be for informational purposes only, although members of the commission that are here can ask any questions you have, but no actions or decisions will be made here today. So, Kat?
Thank you. Good evening. I'm here, Kat Kamak, principal planner, here to present the 2023 Comprehensive Plan Amendments. This is for information purposes only. No action is required at this meeting. So I'm going to share my screen and share a short presentation for this project. A moment. All right, I hope you can see that. Okay. So again, this is the 2023 Comprehensive Plan Amendments, and as the Commission is aware, we do these amendments every year. We start off with the docket in March and go through the process every year, and what we have accomplished in that given time, we try and amend them with amendments in December, and projects that we are continuing to work on just because the scope is large, we keep them on the docket and we continue to work on them next year till they're ready for adoption. So we started off with a number of items on our docket. The items were the active transportation plan, and I think we covered some of these topics in our joint workshop, but I'll just go over it for information purposes and for public purposes. We have the active transportation plan. It is progressing. We are hoping to adopt that in February sometime. Currently, the plan is going through a CEQA review process, and we are actually engaged in a nice conversation with WashDOT on how the Highway 20 project is going to evolve when it eventually does come. So a lot of interesting stuff there, but that was on the 2023 docket and will be adopted early in 24. We had the alternate street connection plan that was part of the docket, and this is for engineering, had some ideas in terms of street connections and street intersection designs that that are not in the transportation plan, but they think make sense to consider in our network. And so this is a project that they are continuing to work. We don't have any action at this time, so this will continue on to 24-25. The docket also included some land use changes, which is basically combining of the PIP and the PVP into the industrial district. The comprehensive plan amendment portion is done. However, we're just tracking it in this docket for implementation purposes, and the zoning process is in progress, and actually the Planning Commission will hold a hearing on this likely in January. So this is in progress and will likely happen at the beginning of 2024. The CIP, which we're looking at tonight, is on track and is likely the only comprehensive plan amendment that we will be considering with this year's cycle. Because we do this annually, that is one thing that we try to keep on schedule and try to make the changes as we go and get close to December. Another item that was on the docket is the JPA and the UGA, and that discussion is currently in progress. We will discuss in a little bit about the countywide planning policies and how it leads to the 2025 major update of the comprehensive plan. So most of the JPA, UGA discussions will be covered under that process. We are also tracking the housing action plan implementation in the docket. Again, the comprehensive plan portion of it is already done. This is just tracking the implementation. And as you are aware, we are working on several code amendments to address that. And with the 2025 update, we will be addressing a lot more of the legislative requirements. We also have the downtown marina redevelopment on the docket, and that is morphing into the Central Development Area, CDA, as a project. And so that is also ongoing and is likely will be done in 2025. So for the 2023 amendments, we are considering only the capital improvements plan, and some basic policies in the capital improvements plan is that we list projects that are greater than 50,000, that includes the expenditure of public funds and has a life expectancy of 20 years. So those are the kind of projects we're looking at in our capital improvements fund. Projects that are less than 50,000 are not listed here, but they may be in the budget. So if you don't see a project here, it doesn't mean it's not being done. If it doesn't meet this criteria, it's probably sitting in another document, maybe the budget document. We also list capital maintenance projects. Again, if they're greater than 50,000, if they have the expenditure of public funds and the life extension by these maintenance is more than 10 years, then these are all criteria by which we list the projects. So I have on the next subsequent screens, I have the projects and their 6-year schedule with their amounts. These tables are available in this year's document and in the packet. I won't go through them project by project, but I have them available if the commission want to talk about a specific fund or a specific project. We can definitely jump into it. But we have the different funds of the general government, which has some of the general city projects, such as city building remodels. We have our comprehensive plan update, the state mandated update, and the grant that we're getting from that, we're tracking it here as a capital project. So these are general city projects. We have funds for parks and recreation, and we can see that there are projects under that that covers parks. This is a very popular fund that usually the public have interest in, and it has there's money budgeted for the parks, recreation and open space plan, and park improvements and renovations and so on. So and then we have, this is the streets fund, and as you can see, most of our street projects are here. Several projects here for lined up for next year: Northeast 7th Avenue and several street improvement projects and overlay projects with the Transportation Benefit District. So these are all the street projects that are planned over the next 6 years. And again, I can come back to these sheets if the commission has any questions on a particular project, but I'll just kind of go through for just the public's view in terms of what funds are available. So we have a fund for the senior center, and we track those expenses separately. And we have a fund to track the water system updates and projects, and these are all derived from the water system plan and their recommendations on improvements to the system. We have a fund for the wastewater system and all the projects that track along with that. We also have stormwater system, and most of the outfalls along the water repaired using or tracked with funds from in the CIP. And we also have the marina. The marina is a separate fund. It's an enterprise fund in the sense that it tracks its own revenue and uses that for expenses. It doesn't mix with the city taxing fund, so it's tracked separately because we manage that. So these are the capital improvement sheets that have been switched out in the plan from last year's plan. So what does the 2023 update include? It includes only the project and fund table updates. In the sense, in the CIP document, we update the document every 2 years in a more comprehensive way, but every other year, which is the mid-budget cycle year, we just switch the tables out and reflect the most recent changes. We will switch the revenues and fees and indebtedness table. The current document that's in draft form has last year's tables. Our finance department is working on that, and we will have them shortly and include them before we come to the public hearing in January. Again, as I mentioned, we update the other language in the plan every 2 years. And I know there are many things that could be updated in the plan, so please feel free to send me comments and thoughts on what could be updated, and we'll be glad to include all these before we come to public hearing. What is the process for this? The process and schedule. So the tentative schedule for this is it will come before Planning Commission for a hearing in January, and then go to the City Council in February for action. So again, as I mentioned, this is for discussion purposes. No action is required at this time. If the Commission has any questions, comments, or thoughts, be happy to discuss them. That I will return it back to the chair.
Thank you, CAC. Any questions from commissioners? CAC, I just had one question just from my own knowledge. From the facility to maintenance, do all projects at 20 years go over to maintenance, or are projects rated at the time that they're funded? So, for example, I'm thinking if a building is built and it's rated for 30 years, would it go on to that maintenance plan at the 20-year mark regardless, or would that 10-year extension be from the 30-year rating, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so for buildings, we track things separately. You know, we have what's called a capital facility plan, which our public works folks keep track of, and it keeps track of all of our fire trucks and large sewer trucks and all of that. So we have, and they have different criteria and policies by which they look at their them acquiring assets or maintaining the assets. We are looking at mainly kind of like a plan from a planning standpoint, more physical improvements on the ground in terms of infrastructure and things like that. And so maintenance projects are like, for example, annual street maintenance. You'll see that project and it'll have a certain amount throughout the year. So we track that because it's greater than, 50,000. And the general policy is whatever maintenance we're doing is we're extending the life of that infrastructure by at least 20 years. So that's the minimum improvement that we want to try and do to a facility, is to try and get that life out of it.
Thank you. So what could be an example of a project that would start as a facility project, a capital facility project at 20 years, and then on that 21st year become a maintenance project that we would be trying to extend 10 years? Because like street cleaning and that, we wouldn't start that as a facility project, I wouldn't imagine.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, maybe the perception that is different in terms of not all facility projects become maintenance projects. So I don't think the capital improvements plan is trying to track all of it. Otherwise, in our capital improvements plan, we'll have all our streets listed because they're already a certain age, certain number of years old, and we'll be tracking its maintenance. And I don't think that is the intent of the maintenance plan. The maintenance policy is basically how do you select a project to include in the CIP, and why do you prioritize that over something else, is basically the criteria that you use those for. Greater than 50,000, and it has a life expectancy of 20 years. It's not necessarily a way to track all our infrastructure and what do they do over a period of time in terms of value, and that's a different infrastructure maintenance plan that probably Public Works may have.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying my confusion on that slide where it was the facility and the maintenance. I thought they were tied together somehow, so thank you for indulging my confusion there. If there's no other questions, we'll move on to item C, which is the countywide planning policies, and that is also presented by CAC. So, CAC?
Yes, give me a second while I switch my presentation screen, and we'll come back to a short presentation. All right. Again, CAC Principal Planner, here to share information on the countywide planning policies. And I'm going to share a short presentation. So the countywide planning policies are very integral to the comprehensive plan update that we are mandated to do for 2025. And the countywide planning policies are all about consistency between all the jurisdictions. It's just sound planning. It makes sense, but it's very difficult to accomplish if you don't have all the right rules or right mechanisms in place so that everybody can find a way to work together. So that's what the countywide planning policy's intent is to bring jurisdictions together, to discuss issues, and find a way to bring consistency in our understanding of issues throughout all the jurisdictions. So that's what the countywide planning policies generally are, and we've had countywide planning policies for Island County for more than 20 years. Okay. So again, just to give you a little background on it, the countywide planning policies, they either go by CWPP or CPP. However, the state refers to them as CPP, and so we are in our current round of modifications trying to be consistent with that, and so part of our changes that we're considering this year is terminology and so on, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So, but for your purposes, I just want to let you know that CWPP or CPP, at least historically, they mean the same thing. This stems from the Growth Management Act, and I may have mentioned this before, but I'll just kind of briefly mention this, that because of the Washington State's Growth Management Act, we go through these cycles of updates. It's a requirement for all cities and counties planning under the Growth Management Act to update their comprehensive plans. And so our next updated, mandated update is due 2025. The countywide planning policies that we currently have was originally adopted in 1992, and as you can see, it's been amended several times in 1998, 1999, 2015, and I think lastly it was amended in 2017. So it's gone through a series of amendments for various purposes, primarily during these update cycles to bring consistency to the methodology. Again, a county planning group was formed to review the countywide planning policies, and this is a requirement of the adopted existing county planning policies. And so we have been doing that for 6 months or so, and I want to take this opportunity really to thank all the people that were involved in this process and are continuing to be involved in this process, and we hope to be involved till 2025. It's been a really good group and good discussion in trying to bring these amendments forward to you, and I want to thank the county for organizing those meetings. It's been going very well. So this group has formed, and some of the recommendations that you see today are a result of that group's work. So in terms of this information, I think we shared it with the City Council and Planning Commission at the joint workshop. Again, we talked generally about the countywide planning policies, and I'll jump into a little more in terms of some of the results of our work and some of the things that we should just kind of bear in mind as we jump into the 2025 update. So the countywide planning policy, or the countywide planning policy amendments, is primarily being reviewed by this countywide planning group, which has planners from Oak Harbor, Langley, Cookeville, Island County, and also has representations from the base. We have Brian Tiehouse also sitting on the meeting, and we've invited the tribes who've attended one meeting. So it's a good group that is trying to work together to bring consistency. The overall approach in addressing these amendments was to, number one, as I mentioned, consistency, practical growth-related modifications. We looked at the document to see if statements and policies in there are practical in applying it when it does come to these discussions. The general approach was, and this is embedded in the Growth Management Act with the state, that we want to promote growth in urban areas and discourage growth in rural areas. So this is underlying philosophy in terms of how we approach the discussions with the county and the results from that as well. And I'll share that with you in a little bit. We also know, and I say learn on the move, we all knew that we are entering into this process. Nobody has had prior experience in dealing with these kind of requirements, and that we may not get it all right the first time, and that we do have to learn as we go. So that was something that we simply had to accept in order, because some of the challenges are complicated and they are not all evident at the very get-go, and we'll have to find out and deal with these challenges as we go. So, in the spirit of moving forward and keeping things going, we embrace the learn on the move strategy as we dove into these amendments. So what are the scope of the amendments? Well, they're mainly clerical and terminology updates. Again, like I said, the CWPP and the CPP, and there was just many other small details that were picked up and updated. Some of the modifications to the policy, again, we're going with a practical growth-related modification. We looked at policies for natural areas and open space. The previous version was very not in natural areas and open spaces were designated in a way that they couldn't be annexed into the city or brought into the city. And I think we've realized that there are enough protections for these natural areas, whether they're in the city or the county, and that cities can also use these open spaces as an amenity, and we need them. So we have to consider them for inclusion, because we just can't grow only through development lands only, and that we do need natural features and natural areas to be included. So these are things that we're considering to be practical thoughts and making policy amendments to make sure that we have the opportunities to do that. So that's just kind of a high level, but all the amendments are included in your packet. Feel free to go through them, and if you have any questions, we can chat about them. The amendments also covers the buildable lands and housing-oriented changes, and this is a lot to do with the recent legislature and the requirements from the state in terms of how housing should be planned for in every county, and that is the HAP tool. I briefly touched on this at the workshop, and we'll dive into it a little more to see the numbers in the next few slides. So what is the highlights and what is the takeaway that we want from today's meeting and from the work so far? So one of the big things, other than all the policy changes that are in the document, some of the things that are coming up that we may want to be aware of as a result of this work is, one is agreeing on the population. So there is a requirement in the countywide planning policies to say that we all jurisdictions in the county have to agree on what population we're planning for. So that is one of the actions that the county is hoping to bring forward to the commissioners in January. And the countywide planning policy's current process requires all other jurisdictions to ratify that population. So in our discussions with the countywide planning group, we identified the medium OFM, the Office of Financial Management. They do all the projections for all the counties, and that their medium projection was suitable for Island County. So generally, at least at the staff level, there's an agreement that the medium population should be the population that all jurisdictions plan for as we plan for the 2045 or the 20-year update. And the state has also, using this population projection, has used a spreadsheet and calculation to allocate how many housing units each county should plan for. And I'll go over some of those numbers. And so these are all automatic assignments through spreadsheets. And there was a certain number of housing units that were assigned to Island County. I'll go over those numbers a little bit here in one of the spreadsheets. And what is the allocation that Oak Harbor is likely to get? And that's about 5,533 units. So that is the current allocation for Oak Harbor. And I'll go over some of what that means, or what those numbers mean from a general top level purpose without jumping into details. But these are just broad level numbers that we have to plan for. We don't have details on how and if we can get there. That's something that we will go through in our 2025 update. We're hiring consultants to help us with that. The land capacity analysis would have to be done. And then if we need additional capacity, we'd have to look at the urban growth area and see if we can expand. So these are all details that are yet to come. But what we know right now from our current process is that, you know, the population that we have to plan for is about 102,639, and that's for Island County. And the 20-year allocation for Oak Harbor is 5,533 units. And I'll go over some of the details, or maybe this table will help explain. So this table that you see on the slide is in the countywide planning policies in, I think, Appendix B. And this is the HAPT tool. HAPT, I think, stands for Housing for All Planning Tool. I think that's the HAPT. And so this is a spreadsheet. This is just a direct shot of the state's tool. So the projection year is 2045. The population target is 102,639. So, you know, when you select that population target, it's just a drop-down menu that the state gives you. You know, it's low, medium, high, and we pick medium. The table is automatically populated with these numbers. And the only input that we have to give as a county is this blue percentage that we have here. And I'll go over that in a little bit. So basically what the state is saying or requiring counties to do is they allocate the population. The population allocates the number of units that the county will have to plan for. In this case, if you look at it, it's 8,717 units. That's the number of units that Island County as a total would have to plan for. And these 8,717 units need to be assigned to Cookville, Langley, and Oak Harbor, and unincorporated Island County. So these are the four. Freeland falls into unincorporated Island County. So these are the four jurisdictions kind of where you can distribute these 8,717. And the countywide planning group spent a lot of time discussing how to distribute this 8,717 to the various jurisdictions. And all of the methodology for this is outlined in Appendix B. I would encourage you to look at that. It's, I think there was some very good technical work that was done to come up with these percentages. But the overall kind of philosophy in that approach was to try, as I said, to provide growth in urban areas, to try and limit growth in rural areas, which will be to try and limit the expansion of a lot of units in Island County, and for urban areas to take most of the growth. However, as we went through the process, we also realized that towns like Cookville and Langley have restrictions as well. Cookville has the reserve, and that is a big restriction in their housing plan, I think. Tells them basically the capacity that they have within their town, and so that limits how much Cookville can take. And there was also consideration given to how much impact these allocations can have to a town. If a town like Langley, you know, the existing housing supply is 743 units, and if you assign 800 units to them, that's doubling the size of the city in the next 20 years, and that's a big task for any city to take on. So there was considerations given in that aspect as well, in the sense that no jurisdiction should have to take more than 60% of their existing, housing stock as a way to try and support this growth. So having taken into account these practical considerations and all of these, this was the distribution that this tool gave us. So the blue boxes are where the percentages reflect how this 8,717 should be distributed within Island County. And so that's what this table shows us, the total number. So if you look at the bottom row, that is Oak Harbor's allocation. So it says that our existing housing supply has approximately 10,057 units. And we are being allocated through this process to take on 5,533 units of the 8,717 units that have been allocated to Island County. The state also requires that these units be allocated to the different AMI. So this is a new requirement, the average median income, trying to make housing affordable and to spread the different types of housing styles or sizes or requirements across a broader category. So the state tool also not only assigns the total number of housing for each jurisdiction, but it breaks it down to how many units are needed in each category. So for Oak Harbor, the next 20 years, the recommendation is to add 1,127 units that will be catered to the 30 to 50 AMI income bracket, and so on. So sort of a very prescriptive way of doing it. Again, that's why I said learn as you go kind of strategy. We are becoming familiar with this tool and how the numbers are allocated. However, how we get there and the strategies and the plans we make for it, those are the things that we have to learn as we go. So this is the table that is in Appendix B. I just wanted to share some the basic foundation behind that. So what does 5,533 mean? I mean, that is a substantial increase given that the total housing supply for Oak Harbor is 10,057. So I did some graphs to kind of conceptualize what existing condition is and what is it that we are being allocated and what is it that we can expect if we can accomplish that. So this is kind of a sort of a pyramid graph on the existing distribution. So this is the 10,000 existing units, and the state has given us how many sort of units are there in each of these existing AMI categories currently. And if we look at the pyramid, we see that most of Oak Harbor's units, current units, are catering to the 50 to 80% of the AMI and to maybe the 80 and the 100. Those are the largest segment. In the lower segments, we have a smaller percentage compared to these. And then as we get into the higher AMIs, the more bigger and pricier units, the 100 to 120 seems to be small, but the greater than 120 seems to be fairly large as well. So this is the current configuration. Now, it's hard to say whether this distribution is good or bad, and if it's working. Currently, from what we're hearing from the community, we are hearing that we don't have enough in this top end of the pyramid, right? I mean, that's the biggest feedback we were hearing. So we know that this shape of this pyramid is not the best scenario. We do need to maybe expand these options above here in order to make more housing options and better supply available. So what does the distribution pyramid look like? So this is the proposed allocation. This is just the 5,533 units. And you can see that the state HAP tool has already done the math and split all of that out into the various percentages. And if we look at that, then we see somewhat a different profile with more kind of stress put on or more attention given to the 0 to 30 AMI and the 30 to 50 AMI being a larger section. Still recognizing that there is a need for the 50 to 80. 80 to 100 and 120, they seem to be on the same kind of a proportion. And the greater than 120 also seems to have a larger proportion. So it's not a bad distribution if you look at it, in the sense that Oak Harbor is not getting all of just the low income or the low end housing. The distribution does provide for housing in the higher end AMI at a healthy level. So what would a pyramid look like if we were to accomplish this? What if we, in the 20 years of doing this development, and if we were able to provide for this capacity, and if we were able to follow through with the plan, what would it do to the pyramid if we were to look at it? And I just was curious to see how big of a change would it be, and would it make a difference? And so this is the existing distribution, and then this is the 20-year after the 20-year allocation. Well, I'm sorry, this one. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So this slide shows the comparison between the existing distribution and the 20-year allocation. What is, how much are we going to have to plan for? So it's fairly large, as you can see, in the 0 to 30 and 30 to 50. Of course, Carver is taking a larger portion of that segment because we do have the infrastructure to provide that. And so that would be the biggest increase that we would see from our existing distribution, which is what I think the community wants. That's what we've been hearing from all the citizen input. So that would be at a level where we're looking at a plus 150% increase, plus 100% increase. Basically, we're getting an equal number of the existing units for the 30 to 50, and we're getting 3 times the amount in the 0 to 30. So that's a large jump in that. And the rest of it is, 960 is about 25% of the existing stock. 455 is about 24% of the existing stock. And so these are more of a manageable percentages. If we let just the current market go its path, it'll probably satisfy these percentages. But to get to 100 plus 150 and plus 100%, definitely have to think about incentivizing it or having other ways to facilitate that type of an expansion. So that is just to identify where maybe Oak Harbor as a city needs to focus and pay attention over the next 20 years, and where we need to try and up the numbers on. So that's kind of the highlight of that comparison. But as I was mentioning before, what is the comparison between the current distribution, which is on the left side, and if we were to accomplish all that housing, how would the pyramid look like? And it's actually not too bad. The shape is getting a little more vertical. We're looking at we're not looking at a very disparate 80 to 50 and very low 0 to 30 or 0 to 50 even. We start to build that bigger and bigger. And of course, with every update, there will be other requirements and other market changes that will change how the shape of the pyramid goes into the future. But from current allocations and just from a 30,000 foot level, it looks like it's not a bad direction to go to balance things out and provide options for housing. The question of how to accomplish it and what do we do to get there would be the big question as we go into the 2025 update and develop strategies for our next 20-year plan. So with that, from a process standpoint, as I mentioned, we'll have the population come forward with the commissioners in January, and then the cities would have to ratify it. The council will probably take action to ratify that. the 102,000. So what we would hope that the Planning Commission will do in January is to make a recommendation on that population to City Council to ratify that, but we're not there yet. This is just for information that we're discussing this. And the same thing goes with the countywide planning policies. You have a strikeout version in your packet to go through all the changes that we're considering. And that again goes through the same process of the county first adopting it and then the rest of the jurisdictions ratifying it. And we would come to Planning Commission for your recommendation as it goes to the City Council. So with that, again, as I mentioned, no action required, and I'm happy to answer any questions or take any comments. With that, I will stop sharing and send it back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, CAC. Any questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Gore.
What is the current population for Island County?
Good question. I want to say, off the top of my head, it's 80-some thousand, 87,000. I don't know the correct number.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Chazar.
So CAC, if you took every single piece of vacant residential zone land in the city limits of Oak Harbor, can you fit 5,583 units?
Can we?
Yeah. If we just...
Good question. I don't think so.
Okay, so
At least,
that leads my next question is, so I see that there's allocation for unincorporated Island County, about 2,000 units or so. So the UGA, obviously we'd have to grow to the UGA in order to accommodate this kind of growth. The areas of the county that are designated UGA, don't they require, if we want to incorporate them in the city, a certain percentage of vote of the residents in order to agree to that? Or is it because it's just because they're in the UGA, they automatically become a part of the city?
So you're talking about these islands of county that are within the city. Is that mainly the question about?
Or even the perimeter ones that are just a part of the UGA?
Gotcha. Yes, so annexation of them in the traditional way would involve all the property owners or 60% of the property owners being amenable to annexation. However, there's been recently, that's come to our knowledge, a House bill, and this was actually passed in 2020, that allows for the city and the county to enter into an agreement in terms of annexing property into the city without having to go through this voting process. And so there are methodologies by which developed areas in the UGA can be brought into the city.
So I know there was some confusion recently in either social media or the newspaper regarding this county-wide plan that's coming out. We're not required to build 5,583 units in the city of Oak Harbor. We just, as a city, have to be ready to accommodate builders that want to build in order to accommodate future growth. Because last time I checked, we're a capitalism-type market and supply and demand, and builders aren't going to build unless there's demand for the homes. But this plan is just so we are ready for those requests to build? Is that what this plan is for?
Yes, we're supposed to show that we have the capacity to accommodate the distribution of the not only the total number of units, but where we're going to accommodate each of these income levels. So that's also an unknown from a planning standpoint. I've never taken on an exercise of doing this. This is a little more detailed than we're all used to, and so this is going to be a learning curve in terms of how do we show the state, or how do we show the community that these numbers in each of these AMI can be accommodated in the city. And I think the state specifically says where are these going to be as well. So it's kind of related to zoning a little bit in terms of how we it's a work in progress.
I get it. The last thing I have is a comment, and I'm not a builder, but I do feel I have a necessary knowledge of supply and demand. When on an island where property is premium, builders can build very nice homes and sell them very rapidly in this market. If we're going to try to achieve those AMI numbers, I personally believe that this city and this county is going to have to look at significant incentives for builders in order to build units that are going to accommodate that AMI. I know it's a need, and I know it's very, very important, but we just can't assume builders are going to build low-income housing without significant, and I mean significant, incentives for doing so. But it is necessary, but we just can't say we're going to put a plan together and someone's going to do it. We're still a supply and demand.
Absolutely, good points. I think we are having some of the same discussions at the staff level as well. I'm envisioning that we will make accommodations in our 2025 plan to try and accommodate the units that are being allocated to us. But I think there'll also be some efforts to try and identify policies or programs and sorts that can facilitate going in that direction as well. I think the city has always encouraged nonprofit organizations and other housing agencies to come and develop in Ocabra. I think we have no barriers to such, but as you said, we don't know where they're going to come from and who's going to be able to build 5,000 units. That's still a puzzle. But everybody in the state is asking the same questions as we are, and so it's we all have the same challenges. And I think if we figure it out, and if the market can bear, it'll happen region-wide, I think, because the state is trying to do that from a regional perspective. So that's the hope, because most of these we're forced into this kind of a planning process because the state is recognizing that the state population is going to grow by a certain amount. So all that population is going to go somewhere. They recognize that. And so in an effort to try and accommodate that, I think we can be somewhat prepared for what the market may come.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, CAC. So how exactly do we classify the units that are built? Are they classified at the time they're built against the AMI and they stay in that bucket for their lifetime? Because the reason I ask that question is we're looking 20 years into the future, and I could see some creative accounting somewhere where, hey, we hit our mark on that number because the houses we built 20 years ago, if we lock them into what it cost to build them, well, they're all in that 0 to 30 range now compared to our new prices. So how exactly, as we move 20 years down the road, do we classify where a unit is at?
Yeah, good question. And again, a little change in perspective to look at it. I mean, I wouldn't look at an individual house and how it progresses through the years and where it falls in terms of its value. I would look at it, my general outlook when I look at it is we're going to look at it from a zoning and density standpoint. And I think we will allocate certain percentages of value housing to certain densities. So the R4 density or the R4 zone properties is likely to accommodate a certain percentages of 0 to 30 and 30 to 50 and so on. So we will make some sort of assumption to try and allocate these units. And that's what we can do from a planning standpoint. We don't want to get into the details of how a unit is built today at this cost, and then at 5 years it'll be at this AMI, and at 10 years it'll be at this AMI. We don't want to track that. In 10 years, our zoning and our requirement may be different, that we look at density different, and we'll allocate our AMIs based on how the density is working at that time, you know? So we're doing it for planning purposes. So I think what we'll do is we'll look at the overall zoning, we'll look at our density requirements, we'll see our current density and how it can accommodate these various percentages. And then, like I said, learn as we go. That's why we got consultants, at least we're trying to hire consultants, is, okay, if we can't accommodate these within our current density, then the state is saying, okay, you need to relook at your zoning ordinance, relook at your densities, relook at your development regulations, consider changes, and then rerun your calculations to see how you can accommodate. So we have a lot of work cut out for us in terms of trying to find land capacity policies that will work, and then eventually how are we going to accommodate these various, the total units and all these sections. So a lot of interesting questions and a lot of things to think about. And so I don't know the answers to all of these, but that's kind of my 30,000 foot level take on how we may address this issue.
So if I'm understanding correctly, and please tell me if I'm not, if we're not careful, we could find ourselves in a situation where we meet the density goals and yet fail to address the housing struggles that the community is facing. We may hit 5,000, but they may not be 5,000 units that community members can afford to rent or purchase. Am I understanding the risk of getting this wrong?
In some, there's going to be some housing that will have controlled affordability. So if we go through and have our MFTE programs, which is still on the table for discussion with with next year's city council and so on. So we have some programs and some ideas already in terms of how we can bring affordability requirements into the community, right? So if we have those requirements in place, and if we have these designated RTAs, then we can start to determine, at least in the short term, how many of approximately, percentage of 0 to 30 or 30 to 50 affordable units we can get out of it. The rest of the market is probably a little open. If it's zoned R2 or if it's zoned R1, low density, what will we get for that? We will definitely have the market bear some of that. But the idea is that higher the density, lower the housing costs, more options, more housing types. Maybe the number increases, the affordability goes down. This is all kind of anecdotal a little bit, or hope that if you do this, that will happen. But nothing assures us that we will build exactly these number of units in these categories.
Thank you, Commissioner Gore.
I want to contribute to that. Most of what is zoned R4 right now, which should be the multifamily that would have these affordability factors, has the Oak Harbor view. And the places that have been built are not cheap. So I don't know how difficult it is to rezone things, but I think we have a zoning issue.
That's a good point. I mean, with the 2025 update, we will have a chance to ask those type of big questions. Do we want to do overall rezoning changes? Do we want to consider different zoning categories? And also, what is the zoning that we want for areas that we will likely grow into? So it looks like, for the most part, that we will engage the county in some sort of a discussion to expand the UGA boundaries. At least it looks like from all the numbers that we're seeing, even though we haven't actually sat down and actually done the land capacity analysis. And when we do that, there's an opportunity to zone those areas to accommodate a lot of this density. And we could go through the whole 2025 comprehensive plan process. We could do the land capacity, find out that our existing zoning is not accommodating the densities we need in order to achieve this, and we may even consider changing that. So all of these are open for discussion for the 2025 comprehensive plan. So it's a big change, and we are going to go through some big questions and big decisions in 2024 as we go towards the 2025 update.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from the commissioners or comments? All right, well, thank you, CAC, for both of those presentations this evening. We will move to member comments. Any comments from commissioners? Okay, well, I have just a couple comments. This is the last meeting of 2023, so I want to thank all the commissioners for their time, and this is a volunteer position to the city, and it is a time commitment. So thank you to all the commissioners who have donated their time in service to the community. Thank you to the staff, City of Oak Harbor staff, especially those of you that are here with us every single one of these meetings, taking time away from your family and from dinner. And I know that some of you have long drives to get here and to get home. And certainly in these winter hours when it gets dark at 3, 4 in the afternoon, that can be a challenge. So I appreciate that commitment to making sure we can do what we do and to the best of our ability. And just wishing everybody a happy holiday season, and thank you for what you do. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Appreciate the kind words, and we also appreciate working with you. You're a very engaged, thoughtful group. Appreciate the research you do before you get here, and that's going to help us go a long way. If I could take a second, if you're ready to move to a comment period for me. I thought I'd just give you an update of a couple of items coming up so you can be prepared for what's happening in the future. The continued items that we were not able to talk about tonight, those will be heard, of course, as you know. They will continue to the 23rd of January. Also in January, we are talking about our leadership retreat information that we've been working on as a director group all year long. And so I'd like to bring that information back to you and show you what we've been working on. Essentially, it's the same things that you talked about back in 2022, which was where you set the goals and objectives along with the city council for the future. So we're working on those, and I can give you an update on where we stand on a lot of those projects. So that will be in January. Also in January, we have our annual performance evaluations that we get to do for all of our staff, and that'll be done by the end of the month in January. In February, on the 12th, the council will be doing their annual retreat, and that'll just be themselves. I'm not sure if they'll use a facilitator again this time, but they'll set the goals and objectives, major projects they'd like to work on over the next year. Also, the yearly report to the Planning Commission will be done in February. So we usually, that's by code, we're required to do that in February. So we'll bring that back to you, and it'll be somewhat similar to the work I do in January, but it'll be a little broader in February. The yearly report will go to the City Council in March, and so that will continue on with reporting out on the various projects that we do, and we'll get feedback from them. So that's the next few months, and that doesn't really deal much with our day-to-day stuff that we do, but that's the stuff that involves us. So I just wanted to give you an idea of what we'll be working on coming up. And again, I thank you, and I thought we had a very good year, and look forward to the future.
Thank you, Director Cool. Any other comments? If not, we will move to adjourn this evening's meeting. Can't take any act, well, we'll adjourn the meeting, correct? Yeah. Remove the word